All right, YouTube photography fans, let's do a little review here of these tripods. This one here on the left is the Davis and Sanford Vista Explorer. This one over here is the Ravelli APLT-4. And then the other one, which I'm not going to put on camera, is the Amazon Basics 60-inch. And as near as I can figure, they're all the same tripod. They look like they're all made exactly the same. And they're not very expensive tripods. And they're not very durable. They're very lightweight. They're made out of really cheap, flimsy materials. Basically, I wouldn't do any serious photography with one of these tripods, but they do have their uses. As I say, they're made out of very lightweight materials. One of the big design flaws, I don't know if I'll call it a flaw, but a design aspect is, let me see if I can show it. Yeah, right here. These pivot points where the legs connect to the center column, and out here where the legs connect, these braces connect to the legs where these braces connect to the center column. That pivot point is really a very cheap and weak point. It's a tiny little aluminum rivet. It goes through a little bitty small diameter plastic bushing. It's not the least bit durable. I had another tripod that I used for sheet music, and it had the same exact setup with these little bitty aluminum rivets through those tiny plastic bushings. Those things are prone to breaking, so if you get one of these tripods, be aware that if one of those pivot points breaks and you've got a couple hundred or couple $1,000s worth of camera up there, it may go crash into earth. Oops, sorry, hang on. I loosened up the wrong screw on my other tripod here. Let me get that back in the picture. So yeah, they're very cheap, they're very lightweight. There's a weight hanger hook down here at the bottom. I don't know if I had that in frame or not. There it is. This hook down here. You can hang a weight on there. This hook's made out of cheap, thin plastic. I suspect it would easily break if you put a very heavy weight. I do put weights on there. I use these things mainly to hold up fireworks firing modules, which is obviously not photography. But I'll hang a 5-pound barbell weight on there. I take a barbell weight and I take a zip tie and then also one of those hooks from a bungee cord. So a zip tie and a bungee cord hook onto a barbell weight, and I use barbell weights to hold these things down if it's windy out there. But that plastic is really cheap. I don't know how much weight it will hold. I've seen videos and reviews where all the various pieces on these things can break because they're very cheap. Now, this panning handle here, you can unscrew it and screw it. When you unscrew it, it goes easily up and down, and when you tighten it, you know, it keeps it steady there. Don't unscrew that thing all the way to take it off, you know, because you want to make it compact for stowing. If you unscrew this thing all the way, there's a nut up here that will probably fall out and you'll probably lose it. And it's not easy to get a nut back up in there because I had to do that once. So if you want to unscrew the panning lever here, you can loosen it, but don't unscrew it all the way. You're going to lose the nut that secures it. Now, this one, I've lubricated it very well, and it works very smoothly. But this other one over here, I haven't lubricated it yet, and it's really stiff, and it's got some free play there before it catches and then becomes stiff. It's really stiff in its motion, and if you're trying to, you know, use it for video purposes, you can, but it works much, much better if you lubricate. And you can lubricate all the pivot points you can see everywhere where there's a pivot point, vertical pivot points, horizontal pivot points in here. If you look carefully at the head, you'll see all the places where the pivot points are. Get in there and lubricate that real well. I used Bow Shield to lubricate in there, and it makes that head extremely smooth. The next thing I would do on these tripods is get some of this silicone lubricant, Magic Lube, and you could lubricate various points on the tripod with this stuff. Which tripod am I looking at? This one? Yeah, this one. So this is the lock for cranking it up and down. You can take that lock knob loose, lubricate those threads so this is more lubricated. Is that in frame? Yeah. Lubricate these teeth. Take that thing all the way up. And then lubricate those teeth with some lubricant. Another good place to lubricate these, let me put this in frame. The locking levers for the legs. These locking levers right here. You can put a dab of lubricant right there where that thing is. That's a cam right there, and that cam bears inside of there on a little piece of the leg. And if you put a dab of lubricant on these cams on all of these locking levers, those locking levers will work more smoothly and they'll be less likely to break. Now, there's pivot points all over these tripods. There's pivot points for the cams. There's pivot points for these stays. Everywhere you can find a pivot point, lubricate it with some Bow Shield. Every pivot point you can find. And this thing will work much better, be much less likely to break from undue friction. There's pivot points everywhere. Open the thing up, move it around, find every pivot point on this thing and blast it with some lubricant. They'll work better, they'll last longer that way. Now, these plates, you know, you attach that to the bottom of your camera and then it, you know, goes into the tripod there, and there's a locking lever here. These plates are cheap. You can get a bunch of them, and you can put these plates on anything that you want to get up off the ground. You don't just have to use these for photography. In fact, I almost never use them for photography. The only thing they're good for on photography would be like a light camcorder. They're too lightweight to put a big camera in. You could never put a camera on there with a macro lens or a zoom lens. You might be able to put a DSLR with a kit lens, and that's about it. I don't use them for photography. I use them for all kinds of other stuff. But you can get these plates, and you can either remove the fixing screw and the spring pin. They're easy to get off. And then glue that plate to something else, and then put it on your tripod. I use Christmas laser lights. I've got a model rocket launching pad. You can just put this plate on anything that you want to get up off the ground. And if you want to glue it on, you need to remove the screw and remove the pin. That's easy to do. Or you can get a 1/4 by 20 tap and drill a hole in anything you want to and tap the hole with a 1/4 by 20 tap, because that's a 1/4 by 20 thread. And then you could screw that thing onto anything that you want to get up off the ground. There, if you think about it, you'll find a lot of uses for a tripod to get stuff up off of the ground. And these plates are readily available on Amazon. They're cheap. I've bought tons of them to put on all kinds of things to get stuff up off the ground. They're not durable. You cannot be rough with these things. When you stow them, when you transport them, you can't put anything on top of them. You know, if you fold that thing up, throw it in the back of the car, don't put anything on top of it. It'll break. Everything about these is cheap. I've seen video reviews where every single part has broken on these things. So you have to handle them with care. Lubricate everything that you can find that moves, and they'll last longer for you that way. Fully stowed, that thing's 24 inches. Looks like this Ravelli weighs 2 pounds 9 ounces. Davis and Sanford Vista Explorer, looks like 2 pounds 7 ounces. I don't have the Amazon Basics, but believe me, it's right in with these two. All right, so check this out. That's a fireworks firing module. And normally people have these things on the ground, and you connect wires into these speaker terminals. And you know, if you're setting up hundreds of fireworks for a big display, you're down on the ground all day long on your hands and knees, you know, trying to stick wires in here on the ground. It's not easy. So I put these things, my firing modules, on a tripod, and I pick that tripod up to about belly height or chest height, and I can spend all day working standing straight up, not bent down on the ground. So, as I say, there's a lot of uses for these tripods. I took the mounting plate. There's a screw and a spring pin, and I removed those, and I epoxied that plate to the back of my firing module, and it just fits right in there. I can see what I'm doing here. And then I've got that kind of close to the ground for photography purpose, but I'll pick that thing all the way up, and then I can work at waist height all day setting up fireworks. Now I got a model rocket launch pad here, and I just took a block of wood and drilled it out for the launch rod and slide my blast deflector plate, and on the bottom of the block I put my tripod plate. Now this is a plate for a different kind of tripod. This is called an Arca Swiss plate, and it doesn't work on these Amazon and Ravelli and Davis and Sanford tripods. I use a different tripod for this, but the concept is the same. You can put a tripod plate on the bottom of anything you can think of. Then I can set this thing up at waist height. And again, I don't have to get down on the ground to try to wire up my igniter to my engine there. I can be working, you know, up at chest height or waist height without having to get down on the ground. So you can let your mind be creative in how you want to take these tripod plates and put them on different things to get things up off the ground on your tripods. Okay, I'll put a tail end clip on this. This is the Amazon Basics. It's exactly the same as those other ones. The Davis and Sanford Vista Explorer and the Ravelli APLT-4. It's the same tripod. Here's a better view of that plastic hook that I told you isn't real strong. Here's a better view of this connection between the legs and the center column with this tiny little rivet and this little bitty plastic connector bushing. That's a failure point right there. I've had it fail before. Anyway, I just wanted to throw in the Amazon Basics to show that it's the same as those other ones, and everything I said about those other ones, that all applies. You know, lubricate all your pivot points. Anything that moves, lubricate it. For places that could benefit from some grease instead of oil, your cams here, and any other spot. But anyway, that's the Amazon basics.